Hi, Steve.
Hey Lisa, how are you?
I'm good. We are back for another conversation. And
We are.
today we are talking about habits.
We
And
are.
yeah, you and I actually met up in Lisbon over the summer, and you were talking all about habits. It was a topic for you. So, what had you looking at habits at that point in time?
I actually can't remember exactly what had me looking at habits at that point in time. I probably read a book or something about it, as you do, and
Mm,
you then like end up just like rehashing everything you've read.
yeah.
But also, I guess obviously I study a lot of personal development. I know you do as well, and I think for me, I guess when it comes to like goals and improving ourselves and becoming who we want to be and all that good stuff, to me, it all really comes down to habits often. In
Yeah.
fact, I'll recorrect that. It doesn't all come down to habits, but habits are a big part of it. They're a big part of becoming the the version of yourself that you actually want to be, how you want to show up in life, work, relationships, all of that stuff. A lot of it comes down to those daily, weekly, regular things that we do that end up with a result of how we're experiencing our life.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I know that often we think about goals and who we want to be, and looking at the habits that are associated with that end game or that future destination is probably a more effective way of looking at things than simply yearning to be whatever version of yourself that you want. But getting to the actual habits that kind of fuel that, I think, is probably a bit more of a direct line to getting there.
Yeah, I think one thing that's come up for me, at least maybe over the last year or so, I think we talked about this in one of our very first conversations, was around like how we set our goals for the year. And I remember
Yeah.
saying at the time, which I can't believe it's like 10 months ago now, but I remember saying at the time that this year I was trialing more of a, rather than setting specific goals, it was more of how do I want to be this
Yeah.
year. And I remember saying, I want to be energetic, I want to be proactive, I want to be confident. It's like it's more, rather than focusing on the goal, it's like I'm just going to focus on that, and I'm going to let everything else evolve from there. And it's really
Yeah.
served me well. And
Yeah.
and I guess it speaks to what we're talking about now. It's like, okay, so what are the habits there, and what's the outcome of that versus just focusing on a specific goal? Like, okay, I need to go to the gym every day. How does that inspire me versus more focusing on the way of being? Because they're two different ways of, I think, looking at life. Really, the goal, focusing on the end goal, or just focusing on the who do I actually want to be.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you use that. I want to go to the gym every day, because it almost feels the way I used to look at habits was very similar to that. And now I hear that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just setting us ourselves up for failure. It's setting us
Yeah,
ourselves up for beating ourselves up for not fulfilling that, for having a day off day or whatever. But I know when I looked at habits as something that I had to do every day, or that kind of spoke to a very specific action that had to happen or else, then that's where my mind started getting overly involved. And I remember just going, oh, I just don't have the willpower to do this, or I just don't have the motivation. And then that impacts your energy, which makes you less
mm,
likely to do it. And then it becomes this vicious cycle. I remember being in that cycle often. And like, I have a goal, I'm good for a few days, maybe even a few
yeah,
weeks, maybe even a few months, right? And then all of a sudden something happens and that habit is broken. I'm back to some old habit that I've decided is a bad habit. And then
yeah,
the self um, bad talk starts, right? And it just kept
yeah,
on going that way.
yeah. No, I think it's like what you were saying. Like if you think of it as like the gym, or I need to eat less tomorrow, it's so functional. It's just so functional, and it's so bit of a downer, really, when you're looking at those things like that. You might be fine for a week or two when you're motivated with a new goal, like you say, but I don't know. It's like it gets to the point where it's like, right, tomorrow another gym, another this, another that, another. It's just so, it just feels functional, and it just doesn't feel enticing. I think with
Mm.
with trying to reach goals or trying to create new habits, I think you've got to make it sort of interesting or exciting to a degree, rather than focusing on the thing. It's like, okay, why am I doing this stuff? What's the end goal? And I always bring it back to, as we've said before, like, who do I actually want to be? Let me just decide that. Let me get really clear about it. Let me decide it. And then the easier question every day is like, what do I need to do to be that now? And if you're still obviously got, at some point, you've got to go, right, I want to go to the gym. It's not
Yeah.
like you can get out of going to the gym altogether, but I do think it's like the perspective we put on something, the lens we look at it through, can shift how we feel about doing the thing.
Yeah.
Because if ultimately, like for me, like gym's a big part of my life, or not gym, I should say, just feeling healthy, and like it makes me feel more confident. And so therefore, if part of my intention every day, every week, or let's just say my whole life, is to be a healthy, confident person, then I know that about myself, and therefore the gym becomes a lot easier, or the eating choices are a bit easier because I'm so clear about that one thing. You know, it's
Mhm.
less than about trying to tick off, right, 4 gyms this week or 3 this. It's taking it away from that functional thing and getting it more deeply rooted in like, who am I in the world? Like, what am I? How am I showing up?
So how does that work? So it sounds like there's kind of defining who you want to be, right? Like use the
Right.
example of going to the gym. So how is
Mhm.
this way of doing things different than what people typically do or what I've done in the past, which is like I got to go to the gym and then,
Yeah.
one day I don't and I get pretty pissed off at myself, let's say.
Yeah. I think, how is it different? I mean, I guess when you're looking at a normal resolution and you're saying, yeah, I want to lose 30 pounds, I'll feel happy when I've lost 30 pounds. You
Mm,
can then, you're focusing on the 30 pounds, you're seeing the 30 pounds in the mirror, you're going to the gym. At least at the beginning, you probably are, if you've got to set a new resolution or something, and you're looking at the scale every 5 minutes, probably 3 times a day often, which some people actually do.
yeah.
And then you either don't see the progress straight away and then you revert back, or you get to it, but then actually once you've hit the 30 pounds, or like running a marathon, for example, you run the marathon, then you sort of figure, oh, I've done it. And then it's very, very hard to then carry on because your focus has been so much on the thing that
Yeah.
it's hard to then get that motivation to carry on. It's like you've been
Yeah.
striving so much for a thing. Whereas I think the other approach, where it's like, rather than I need to do this by then, it's like, who am I? Who do I want to be? Like, I don't want to, if you want to avoid this kind of yo-yoing, it's like, who do I want to be? And let's get really clear and rooted in that. And then, what are the behaviors of someone I want to be? Maybe look at someone, you look up to and say, who are they? What are they doing? It's not that you're doing those exact things, but you're starting to trying to channel, the sort of behaviors that someone that's healthy, or someone that's motivated, or someone that's proactive, that you're starting to note, to think, what are the behaviors? And then you can start living into that a bit. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, if you actually start doing that for a few days, and it's like everything though, you still have to remind yourself about this every day. It's like, every day, today I'm going to be this, today I'm going to be this. But it's more, for me at least, when I look at it from that angle, it's quite motivational to be thinking about, I'm going to fit into who I really want to be today. and
Yeah.
and then you're not really focused so much on the numbers on the scale. You're not focused so much on the weight. You're just focused on the next step, the showing up, the next step. Because every great thing, as we've probably talked about in other videos, happens from all these little steps.
Yeah.
It's just consistency, right? It's like small things, consistency, compounding, etc. So if you're just taking, all you have to do is every day go, I'm going to show up as this today, to do a thing, and I'm going to trust in the power of consistently showing up. And I just think it's a different angle of looking at it. And for me, at least, it might not work for everyone. It just makes everything a bit easier, because every day I know I'm taking a step more towards that, being that well-rounded version of me that I want to be, not that anybody else puts on me, but that I want to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Well, as you're speaking, it's reminding me, it's almost like that what you're looking at is different. Even though it seems you're almost like you're doing similar things,
Hmm.
what you're focusing on is different in each of those stories, right? The first one, the person's focusing on the 30 pounds or whatever number of pounds that are still on, right?
Hmm.
And like many things, it takes time for to see progress, right? And so if you're still seeing how much you have to lose, you're focusing on the negative, right? You're
Yeah.
focusing on the outcome that's still not here. Whereas in the latter one, you're almost focusing on the behaviors that will get you there. And so it almost gives you an opportunity to celebrate the win on a daily basis where, okay,
Yeah.
I've done this, great, right? You're putting your attention on those behaviors and actions that are a bit more energizing and allow you to feel good about yourself that day versus some point in the future where the 30 pounds are off.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's easy. I find it easier to focus on the being, like really channel a way of being, because it then it can show up in different ways rather than in like one or two scenarios. And I'm just thinking when you were talking, for some reason I was thinking like a work scenario. Like I used to
Yeah.
have big anxiety when it comes to work, and or not, I wouldn't like push back enough on people. I'd be a bit of a people pleaser and stuff. And a big thing that's changed for me over time is I used to think, right, I'm going to address this with that person, I'm going to be a bit more like that today, or this person I'm going to say no. It's very specific. Whereas now, and for a long time, I've had this mantra of I've always said this, and I'll say it to a lot of people when I do coaching. It's like, what would today be like without fear? And
Mhm.
when I use that, I guess what I'm saying is like I'm creating myself as a fearless person. And every day, I believe me, if you say that enough times every day, and you head into the day with what would today be like without fear, the day will be different because you'll show up differently in lots of different situations rather than like a one
Mhm.
person. You'll just feel it, yeah. And the opposite to that could be today. I'm going to show up as a fearless person, to be more
Yeah.
specific, right? Today,
Mhm.
I want to design myself as a fearless person that isn't always living in fear or living, yeah, and worried about what people are going to think of me. And if you, and I've always said this before as well, it's like if you do that enough times repeatedly, you will start to actually feel that and start to
Yeah.
create that. It doesn't happen like overnight because you'll forget the next day, right? Or the next day you'll think, oh, I didn't do that. But it's like everything, consistency.
Yeah.
And through doing that, you can then start to create these moments in your life that are fearless, or in the other context, that are healthy, or that are loving, or whatever the thing is that you're trying to lean more into. So I do believe it is just about just visioning yourself and starting to then put it out there, and it will manifest in different ways.
So how would you do that with habits, for example?
In terms of like to create new habits, you mean? Or
Yeah. Yeah. To create a new habit.
so I think for me, it's like, well, if you're a super happy person, and I think we might have talked about this at one of our
Mhm.
conversations, then you probably don't need to necessarily even think about it or look at it. Because if you're super happy, super fulfilled all the time, then you probably got fairly good habits, or you don't really care. If,
Yeah.
however, I'd say the starting point is if you feel a bit unfulfilled, or something's missing, or yeah, you're just a bit down about some aspect of your life, it probably points to some of your habits, I would say. Probably
Mhm.
if you look deep enough, you'll see some of your habits create something that leaves you unfulfilled. So I would probably say, maybe write down like what what are the things that you're not happy about now.
Yeah.
Yeah, write those down, and then look at, okay, what habits, if any, do I have, if I was to be honest with myself, that maybe lead towards those things, whether it's maybe I'm
Mm.
not the ideal way, or maybe I don't have much confidence, or whatever. You can always trace it back to probably some habits.
Yep.
So I would probably start there. It's almost like journal down like the things you're not necessarily overly happy about, um, what those habits are, and get them really clear, and then take an honest look and go, okay, yeah, that is actually me. So if you take it back to what we said at the beginning, like who am I being? Who am I showing up as? Your habits really show who you are in the physical world, at least.
Mhm.
We're all at a deeper level, we're all the same, right, and equal. But if you're talking about the physical world, then your
Yeah.
habits show who you are. And I believe this too. Every day I believe I am what my habits say I am. you know
Yeah.
if I can say, oh, I'm a really spiritual person as much as I want, for example, but if I'm always reacting or overreacting to everyone and screaming and shouting, then I'm probably not.
Yeah.
So, or same thing if I'm saying I'm a healthy fit person but I never work out and I eat McDonald's every day, it's probably not true. So I
Yeah.
guess it's like, yeah, just get really honest with yourself. It's probably a long answer to your
A
question, but get
hard
honest with
exercise. I would
Yeah,
think, right?
yeah,
It's sometimes hard to be truthful with ourselves. And this comes up even with values work, where it's like, well, here are my values. My value is my family, or my values are, but when you look at your lifestyle, maybe it's not aligned with what your values want to be. So this is similar in terms of habits. Maybe you want to be a healthy person, but we have to be truthful and really look at how we spend a week. um, we realize that actually our habits are not aligning with who we actually want to be and how we want to show up.
yeah. No, exactly. It isn't always easy to do this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like any form of big change. Until you accept something, you can't really move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Often if we turn the blind eye to things and we just let things flounder, they'll just carry on for as long as they do, right? So it's only worth doing if like I said, you feel unhappy or you want to change. So
Yeah.
if you want to change, it's worth doing. Yeah, that's the starting point at least.
I almost want to put a little asterisk or like a beware kind of sign here, because I think this is a place also where people can start feeling really bad about themselves for
Mhm.
where they are, and start making stories about, well, this is just how I am. I just don't have willpower, or I'm just not someone who's motivated. This is where we start making up, or our brain starts making up a bunch of, I'm going to say,
Mhm.
crap that
Yeah.
keeps us where we are, right, with the habits
Mhm.
that we have. Now, I think when we start looking a little bit at just the simple science behind it, we realize that it's not about us. It's just patterned behavior, and it's just easier to do what we've always done versus breaking that or introducing something new. That's just science, right? Like that.
Mhm.
So it's not about us being having less willpower or not. That's just how our biology
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got habits, good habits, bad habits. We both do, I'm sure. So it's like anything. You can write this stuff down. You can either choose to let the inner judge, who again we've talked about many times, these inner voices. You can either let them judge this stuff and make a big story out of it when you've written it down, or you could look at it from an unbiased, unjudgmental, and go, okay, those things are my habits. Get curious about it. Like
Yeah.
rather than any judgment, just get curious and go, okay, why might that be? Oh, okay, yeah, because often I struggle with this, or I'm so busy, therefore that habit comes. It's just curiosity can
Yeah.
start to bring you information.
Yeah.
It's so much easier and clearer to see it when you're not judging it.
Yeah.
And then from that perspective, you then get to choose. Okay, well, if I was to reset, what might I want to do differently out of this? You don't have to then go and tackle everything, but what might I want to do?
Yeah.
And then from there, you can start to put in some of the techniques and tips around actually how you can potentially change some of those habits if you want to.
Yeah. As you were talking, I kind of had this vision of someone just putting their scientific lab coat on and being very kind of, you know what I mean? But that's the good way of like, that's not a good way. It's an effective way of doing it, because our inner critic will show up here, right? We're
Mm,
putting down
mm,
all the things that we feel are keeping us from being who we want to be. It's a natural place for the inner critic that we all have to start kind of saying certain things. So
yeah.
to the extent that we could just say, hey, you know what, it's just what it is, I get it, kind of just recognize that the inner critic will come. We don't have to engage with it or believe it, and then just go, okay, like you said, okay, well, what are the things how can I understand this better? What are the things that are keeping me here? What are some of the new habits I want to put in? And then to start working on, okay, now how do I actually implement these new habits? But putting that scientific lab coat, like that metaphorical scientific lab coat, I think keeps us on the data versus the stories that we start to
Mhm.
trying to make up.
That's a really good analogy you've used. But I try and bring that into lots of situations, like in a work environment, particularly when there sometimes can be drama, or actually some even like relationships as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to be I don't set out to be like a cold person in life, but often I do think just take the drama out of it, just look at the facts. It's like often I
Mhm.
say to people that are stressed, in some of these situations, I'm like, what are the facts? Let's just try and get rid of the smoke. What are the actual facts? So therefore, factually,
Yeah.
what do you want to do about it? If you take
Yeah.
some of that out of it, and you could seem a bit cold or scientific, but sometimes it makes it easier to make decisions.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. Okay,
um,
so we figure out who we want to be, right? We figure out what are some of the habits that are keeping us from being that, who all of that we want to be. We look at what new habits we want to implement. So now maybe we can share a few tips on how do we actually start implementing some of those new habits once we've done
yeah,
that work.
yeah.
You have a tip
So
or two?
I have a few, I'm sure. Do you want to go first? Because I feel like I could
Yeah.
go for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the ones that I've used that are pretty mainstream, but I think are worth mentioning here, is, pick a time and place to do things. Like consistency helps our brain just get to doing things and doing them over time. So to the to where we can say, let's say working out, just I work out in the morning, I work out at 8 a.m. I hear the alarm clock. That's my cue to put on my workout shoes. Like things that are consistent and remain consistent over time, I think are helpful in implementing a new habit. The other one I would say is just starting really small, like starting with the smallest little thing. It's not the full habit that we need. Like, don't make it difficult for yourself. Make it as easy as possible. And I think to the extent that you could continue to look at the habit that you want to implement, get scientific about it as well, and look at how easy is it? How can I make it a bit easier? How motivated am I? How can I make myself a little more motivated? For example, like working out with a friend, or these are all kind of things we kind of know, but I think we don't, when we are implementing a habit, always look at it and really go, okay, I want to work out. Well, what are some of the things that I like to do that are active, that I actually enjoy doing, versus I have to hit the gym, even though you've never liked going to the gym, right? Like, what's something that you enjoy doing that you can introduce, right? Maybe there's a buddy you don't see very often. So those kind of things.
Making it more tolerable, enjoyable, whatever word you want to do, trying to find ways to make it less painful in a way, because sometimes it can feel painful to look at a new habit, right? So it's like, if I was to flip the perspective, what could I possibly do to make that almost enticing? Whether it's like, oh, I can go with my friend, like you said, or if I go, then I get to do X afterwards, or I get to do, even if it's things you normally do now, it's maybe like putting a little hurdle before the luxury things you do now by doing that extra thing beforehand is a good one. But yeah, other things to maybe from my perspective, I always think when I'm setting like a new habit or a new routine, I feel like it's good to sort of do a bit of a mental clear out, even a physical clear out. It's like, right, if and this could be something possibly for the start of year, right? But for me, I know that I can set and lean into new habits when I have a clear mind and a clear space. I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's some scientific reason that you probably know more than I do, but for me, that makes a massive difference, because if you've got a clear space, clear home, clear mind, it's much easier to then go, right, I'm starting here. When everything's messy, it's harder. So that's something I would say first. Just do a bit of a clear out, whatever that means to you. And then start small, like you said. Choose the most important one, whatever the most important one is first, because you might have like 3 or 4 things you want to do, but just start with one. I would say maybe tell someone or tell multiple people what your intention is. So if you feel really strongly about stepping into a new way of being, like I talked about, tell someone, like, my intention, I know up until now I might have done X, but my intention is to do this. I'm telling you, because I want that little bit of leverage or accountability. Hell, you can post it. Nowadays everyone posts everything everywhere, right? So you could do that, but even if you just tell your partner or a friend or something, that can help. And then I think we talked about this earlier, but this, for me, this is the biggest thing that's helped me, so I keep talking about it, is that just create a daily note or something that for yourself, that is only for you, that you look at every day, that tells you who you are each day, or who am I. It's like a mirror on your, I use my phone, but it's like, I am X, I am X. Whether it's I'm healthy, confident, fit, and just there is something in that every day. It's not positive thinking, because you have to do something about it, right? You've got to start doing these habits, but it's a starting point, and you can change the wording over time. Mine's changed loads over the years, but it's just something that anchors me and reminds me of, it sort of reminds me who I am / who I'm stepping into. And it really helps. So there's that. And then I guess when it comes to the actual habits, make them as easy as possible. So I know we said tolerable or fun, whether you can get someone else roped in to help, but even just setting everything up ready to go, whether it's your gym gear or whether it's booking an appointment, booking something ahead of time. Like for me with gym, for example, like on the Sunday, I make it easier by looking ahead at all the week. What's going to be my challenging days? Like, where are my busy days of meetings, right? So those days I'm going in the morning, and that's decision made. Put it in the calendar, and then it's scheduled, right? And that can apply to anything. It's scheduled, it's happening. Because and then the other thing actually I do is I forecast ahead. I like imagine the day. I'm like, right, that day I'm doing that. Like, especially if I've got to do something at the end of the day, I'm like, I know I'll be tired. So let me visualize coming home, feeling knackered. So let me visualize and go through it, step through it first, so that I know that when it comes here, I'm still going to be like, no, I'm doing it.
Wow.
So it's just that kind of pre-emptying it a bit so that, I don't know, it's like a run through. This
That,
works for
but
me,
that's
right?
amazing. I've never done that. I think I want to try that. I've never done that. I think that sounds amazing, just to actually visualize forward and go, okay, what's that day? That day might be a challenging day, and that's what I'm going to be thinking. And then I'm going to still go, and this is why, right? And so that your brain's already cued to recognize the tired as a cue to go work out, which is
Exactly,
amazing.
exactly. And when you're visualizing it, you can be saying to yourself, it does not matter what happens that day, I am going. So
Yeah.
I know that I'm going. And then when it comes around and you're a bit knackered, you go, oh, I remember this. Like your brain remembers it from last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you know what they say, if you remember, you visualize and you do
Yes.
something, it's almost the same feeling. So
Yep.
it probably ties into that. But yeah, that always works for me as well. And then the other, I mean, I've got a lot of tips here, right? But the other thing for me is another thing I say to myself, and I don't have it written down now, but I used to. It's like, just trust in the power of consistency. So with your habits, it's like the first few times it's going to it takes a while for something, the curve to go up. It feels like you're not
Yeah.
necessarily getting anywhere at first
Yeah.
with things, but everything compounds. And if you just trust in the power of consistency and do these things that we've sort of talked about, the results will just start to come suddenly. It's like, and then they'll start to shoot up in whatever area you're focused on. It's just science, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. It's just
Yeah.
truth. So just believe that. It's like, so I used to say that to myself, just trust in the power of consistency and it will happen. And then you've got this certainty that the results will come.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned that I think was a big kind of turning point for me, because I struggled for the longest time, I wanted to work out in the morning. I just struggled to just get the workout done in the morning. I knew that that's when I would have the best success rate of getting it done on a daily basis. It's best. I feel best when I work out in the morning, but I struggle to be in the mind frame to get to, I'm going to work out for 40 minutes or 60 minutes right in the morning. And for me, the thing that switched it wasn't I'm getting up to work out. I'm getting up and I'm just putting my workout shoes on. And it seems like such a little trick, but it were like something so insignificant. But really, my brain at that point, as in the morning, but probably throughout the day, just being able to kind of go, okay, all I'm doing is putting on my shoes, right? All I'm doing is walking down to the basement. All I'm doing it right, like, and it wasn't because the whole thing of working out for 40 or 60 minutes was too much of a hurdle in my brain. And so if I just focused on the very next step that had to happen, like all I'm doing is getting up off this bed. All I'm doing is putting on my gym shorts, my gym shoes, or and then that was doable for my brain. And that's really how I started to work out in the morning consistently, was using that little trick.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think it's a really good one because whenever we've got any goal, I know we talked about focusing less on the goal, more of who we want to be, but anything that feels big, you automatically shut down. It's just easier to stay with what we're doing because it just feels too big for our brain to comprehend.
Yeah.
Because when you're over here in this bubble, you can't imagine what life's like beyond it or around the corner. It just seems so far away. But it's like the mountain analogy where you just look at the mountain. How could I ever do that? So you just put it to the side. But ultimately, you get to the top with each step. It's just one step every time, isn't it? That's it.
Yeah.
And even if you, like you say, with the workout, if you just get up and you put the shoes on and you go for, even if you go for like a 1 minute walk, you're still further ahead than you were. And likelihood is you'll probably actually go for 5 because you think, well, I'm here now.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem that hard just to put on my shoes. It doesn't seem that hard so it wasn't, my brain isn't fighting it as much. And so it seems a lot more doable from that perspective. Okay, so if you could leave people with just 1 or 2 things, what would be the message that you would leave them with for around habits?
I think, well, I guess from my perspective, it would be that's meant the most to me, which is that, well, resetting So having a reset, do something different to break your pattern, whether it's cleaning your house, cleaning out your phone, or whatever it is, or just taking a day or 2 days to like reset and go, right,
Yeah.
I want to do this new thing from this day, tomorrow, or whatever. And then I would say write down not so much the goal, it's like, who am I / do I want to be? Again, that who am I, but almost feel it, and who am I stepping into, and start to sort of remind yourself of that each day as a guide, a bit of a compass towards stepping into the new habits. And then just start small with the most important one, and trust in the power of consistency. How about you?
I would say don't beat yourself up, because I think it's part of human nature just to sometimes be really consistent with a habit and then sometimes fall off. And so to the extent that we just go, oh, okay, just time to recommit, right? Just time to recommit with that type of energy, just time to recommit, rather than the kind of making it mean something about me and what's lacking in me. I think to the extent that we could just know that it has nothing to do with us, right? Doesn't have to mean anything about us. It's just a wired in pattern that we're either trying to break and introduce a new one, right? And so I think the idea of just holding it lightly and then being willing to just simply recommit are two things I would say. And then just make it as easy as possible. Don't do what your friend did to get in shape. Do what you love to do to get in shape. Don't do what your friend did to start reading, more. Do what you like to do to start reading more, if even you want to read more, right? Like, I think in today's world where there's so much said on social media and so much, said on 24-hour TV channels and stuff, we're always trying to maybe live up to other people's good habits. And I think this probably ties into what one of yours was, which is like really personalize them. We don't have to have all the good habits, right? We just need to commit to one or two that really feel good to us, that we resonate with, that are important to us, and then make it as fun and easy as possible.
Yeah, and another one that came to me, actually, another thing, I don't know if we talked about this, but it's like prioritizing. Actually prioritize it for yourself. So it's not like you're prioritizing it because the inner voice is saying, oh, you have to do it. But if you've taken the time to take stock and said, actually, I want to be more of this in the physical world, then decide that 1 or 2 habits, whatever those things are, schedule them, prioritize them for you, and make everything else movable, but not that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's easy to get taken down the river. We get it. This is how often all of us, we end up doing things or doing habits we don't want, because the world is demanding a lot of us now in so many different ways. So if we don't prioritize us and out the things that are important, no one else is going to.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. Okay, good place to end it. Thanks again, Steve. I'll see you next time.
See you soon.
Okay, bye.